Welcome GRD130, Graphic Design History, or History of Graphic Design. We're going to do a hands-on assignment. We're going to work with a mark and logotype. It'll be a logotype with a mark, so we're going to try to make the mark as simple and somewhat clever as we can. It'll be just something I just made up, and we'll just work through using some tools in Gravit to make a nice symmetrical logo and keep it as simple as possible. Now in Unit 4, you're going to go down here to the shared link and just click on it. And if you're already logged into Gravit, it should let you go in. Otherwise, you're going to have to log in. So let me click on it. I think I'm logged off. So let me click on this shared link. And I always try to share it from a different account, so it's not the same one. And it's asking me to log in down here. So that means I'm not logged in yet. Even though you'll be able to see it, make sure you log in. So now I'm logged in, and it's saying that the design was shared by Richard Homa. That's me, but this is a different account. So I'm just going to close that, and I'm going to save it by going File, Save to Cloud. Now make sure you save to Cloud. You're not going to save a local file. Save to Cloud as, and I don't know if you made a folder yet for your 130. I made one here, so I'm going to save it into here, into this folder, and I'm going to put my name over last name F. So I'm just going to highlight over that. I'll put my last name, first initial, and then there's no save button, so you just have to hit return or hit your enter key when you're saving from a shared link. But that should work. And once you do save it to your cloud, you should get a share button. And if you're not seeing a share button, I've had some issues pop up. You know, it could be a browser issue or something like that, but let me know if you're not seeing a shared button. I think you can also go over here. If you don't see the button for whatever reason, you can go over here to share and do share file, and it'll bring up the same kind of dialog box that comes up when you hit share. But we'll deal with that later. For now, just make sure that you're saving when you're working on it. When it's gray, it means it's saved. Otherwise, you're going to save it. Now, what you're going to see here to start, a picture of a dog. Now, it's on its own layer. It's called image. I have it locked so we don't really mess with it or move it around. I centered it as best I could. I also put a line down the middle, which is at 4 1/4, which is halfway across our page. This is an 8.5 by 11 page, a letter size page. And I put the opacity down on the dog so we could kind of trace over it. And this was my idea to come up with, here's the finished sample that I ended up doing. And I'll zoom into this a little bit so you can see it. And again, this isn't the greatest logo. It's just an idea I had. I was looking for a happy dog. I thought it'd be cool to have a happy dog. And then after I had happy dog, I said, well, it's a brewing company. Why don't we call it Hoppy Dog? You know, because hops, they make hops to make beer. And I thought that would be cool. So it's called a Hoppy Dog, and it has kind of a happy dog face. And I did have ears, and I had a couple other things, and I kept taking stuff away because I like the idea of having it as simple as possible and just kind of hinting at a happy dog without having all the other kind of stuff on it, without seeing the ears and all that. Now, you could try putting floppy ears on or something to make it work, but I tried to keep it as simple as possible to just have it as like a simple icon, very open and free, without, you know, a whole illustration of a dog or anything like that. And that's what we're going to work to. We'll just work on doing this very simply in Gravit with some of the tools. It'll get you used to using some of the tools to build your own stuff. The logo type down here with Hoppy Dog and Brewing Company is just basically a script font with a fill and 2 strokes. There's a black stroke and a white stroke to give it kind of a double effect here, to kind of highlight the contrast between the gold color or the beerish color and the black. So there's white in between to kind of highlight the contrast. And then down here, Brewing Company is just in a sans serif font. It's in a condensed font, meaning they're narrow letters in terms of their width, and they're kind of spread out too to make them look lighter. And they're also meant to have Hoppy Dog get most of the emphasis and this be kind of secondary. So that's the idea here. We have Hoppy Dog, we have kind of the descriptive name underneath, and then a little bit of an icon to just pull it all together. And that's what we're going to work on. And again, I just made this up. It's nothing I've ever seen before. I just thought it'd be neat to have Happy Dog, and I changed it to Hoppy Dog. So you could certainly change things as you go, but I'll just go through this so that you understand some of the tools. And part of it's going to be working on keeping things symmetrical, because I have 2 eyes, I have a mouth, and the hardest thing is keeping it so it looks even on both sides. I'll show you some steps to try and do that a little bit better. And some of it involves just making one shape, copying it, and then grouping them and centering things on a page. So we'll get started here. So this is the finished sample. And you could go back and look at it, but I'm going to start here, and it doesn't have to look exactly like that. And this is my inspiration for the dog. And like I said, you can mess with ears, you can, do other things. I kept things pretty simple. I like that it had kind of a smiling face on it. So I'll start with the easiest thing on here first. Now, keep in mind, once we start drawing, we'll create our own layer, and this is already locked. So we're going to start working above here, and we'll try to name our layers as we go. So we have a nose, we have eyes, and we kind of know where things are at. And also, when we draw these, we want to keep them so they have no fill, but they have a stroke, so we could see inside of these. And I'll show you what I mean once we get started. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to do Command plus. If you're on Windows, you could do Control plus. And I'll start with the simplest thing to make a nose. I'll just go here and use an ellipse, which is basically a circle, and I'll just draw a circle as best I can over top of the nose. Now, when you do that, it's going to have a fill of gray. And down here, you can see there's a fill and there's border. There's no border, but there's a fill. So I'm going to get rid of the fill by hitting the trash can. But I do want a stroke, so I'm going to click on border, just so it has a 1 pixel border for now. You can leave it without a border and still work with it, but it's easier to see this way. So I'm going to do this and just kind of shape it. Now, I don't want it a complete oval like this. So what I'm going to do, right now it's an ellipse. And that's kind of a special shape, like a square, that you can't really grab the anchor points and move them around. You can squash it and stretch it, but what I want to do is go over here to convert to path and click on that squiggle button, and nothing really happens yet except it's now called a path. And what I could do is go over here where the pointer is. The black tool is the pointer. That's meant for grabbing the whole shape. Subselect gets the different parts of it, these anchor points. And what I'm going to do is just kind of click on that top point, just use my arrow key on my keyboard and kind of nudge down a little, and then take this and nudge down just a little bit. Just make it a little bit longer like that. And I could even pull this in a little. Now, one thing I could do here, when I click on this, I want to make sure that this is mirrored. What that does is it means these handles stretch out the same distance each time. So let me zoom in a little bit more. So when it's on mirrored, if I pull one out, the other goes out the same distance. So if I go in, they come in the same distance, and if you hold shift, they'll stay straight. And that's all I want to do, is make it a little more triangular so it doesn't look so much like an oval. And that's it. And that's all I need to do with the nose right now. And I'll double click on this word path, and I'll just call it nose. Now there's other parts we're going to add to the nose. I'm going to throw in some nostrils, and might as well do that right now. I'm just going to draw a little oval, kind of like that. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm going to rotate it. You can rotate it around the corner, or you can use this thing, that little handle, whatever you like doing. I'm going to go on the corner and just kind of rotate it and just make a little nostril like that. I'll make it a little bit smaller. You can grab on the corners to do that. And I'll show you how to make this symmetrical, meaning everything's going to be centered. Now right now, if I click on this thing, the nose that I made, I can go here and click on this and align center. That'll center it on the page. So it centers it right on there exactly. So we're going to try to keep things centered on here. So here's this thing. I made my little nostril, and I guess I could nudge it up a little because on the real dog's nose, it's up a little bit higher. And it doesn't have to look exactly like real dog's nose, but you can try. Let me use this thing. I'm having a little problem with that. So I guess I'll leave it like that for now. That looks okay. And I want the same one on the other side. Now, how do I position this so it's exactly the same way and exactly in a kind of mirrored position? Well, for one thing, we have to make a duplicate of it. And to do that, we can go Edit, Duplicate, and it's right on top. So sometimes that's confusing, but it's right there. So I'm just going to drag this over. And if you move things over, you can kind of keep it so if you move up and down a little, it'll stay kind of in line with the other one. Up and down, you can see those things there. And I'll just do that, and I'll leave go, and then I'll flip it. Now here's a flip tool right here, flip horizontal, and I'll do that, and then I'll just nudge it in with my cursor. Now, how do you get that perfect? Well, you don't have to. You can kind of get one of them and get them about where you want them. Now, also make sure they're the same up and down. So I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to hold my shift key and click on the edge of this. Now, when there's no fills, you have to click on the edge. So I'm going to click on the edge, and then I could use this. This will make sure that they align this way. So that's why they show that little line going through there. So align middle. And they were aligned, so nothing really happened. But to get everything centered right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to group these. In other words, to kind of lock them together so they move together. To do that, there's a tool up here, or a button that says Group Items. And I'll just group them. and they'll become a group over here. They're still in here. You could still go in here and click on one and click on the other if you need. But I'm going to name the group Nostrils. That sounds like a good name for that group since they're nostrils. And now if I select the nose, and you could do it over here too. You could select the nose here. There's nose, and then you could hold shift and select the nostrils. Now they're all selected, but really there's only two things because there's a group and there's a nose. Now if you center these, they'll center together. And I'll kind of nudge this over a little bit so they center on the page. Or you could do this. You could just click on this and use this align center, center it on the page, and then select this and center it on the page. And now I have my nostrils. Now we can do this so that they knock out of here, they kind of subtract, or we could just leave them white. I just left them white. Normally what we want to do is subtract them out of here, and let's see if we could do that. Now we have a group right now. I don't know if that's going to let me do it, but usually what happens is the top objects will subtract out of the bottom objects. So the nostrils are on top. Let's see if this works. We'll go to subtract. And that worked. And it's a compound shape. And if you go here and click on convert to path, that'll make it permanent. Now if you're not sure yet, you could just leave it alone and go over here to compound shape and just call it nose, because that may be easier in case you want to change your nostril or you don't like them. That way they're still actually there. You could still get to the nostrils inside here. The two ellipses are still there, so all that stuff's there. So that's one reason why you may not want to make it permanent. But you can still fill this thing and make it look like a nose. So this nose that I have here, I can go over here to fill, and I can add a fill, and it made it black, and I'm going to delete the border by using the trash can. And you may not want to have it black, but I'm going to leave it like that for now. That looks okay. So I have my nose done, and I'm going to save. And what I'll do next is I'll make an eye. Now instead of messing around with ovals and things like that, let's draw it with the pen tool. Let's go up to the pen tool, and the way this works is you can click and click again and make straight lines, or you can click and you could drag and make a curve. I'm not sure if we did that in the other exercise, but I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible. I don't want real detailed eyes. I'm just going to click here at the corner of the eye, right here. Now, before I even start, I should have mentioned this, I should take away the fill and give it a border so that I could see through it when I'm drawing. And I deleted it again. I want to add that. So I want a 1 pix border, and that's when I'm drawing with the pen tool. So I'm on this pen tool. So I'm going to start here in the kind of the corner of his eye. I'm going to click, and then I'm going to go up here. Now if I just click, it'll make a straight line, but I'm going to click and drag and kind of make a little curve like that, just a little bit. You can see I'm pulling out handles. If you pull them out a lot or just a little. I'm just going to pull them out a little, and then I'm going to go down here, and then I'm just going to click. I don't even have to drag again. I could just go down here, and I'm going a little further, exaggerating the length of his eye so he looks even happier. And then I'll just click, and then to finish it off, I'm just going to click right on top of that point so that they're both kind of greenish like that, and I'll just click. And that's it. Now it's a solid shape. Now if I wanted a little arc there, little tiny arc, I could go to my sub-select tool and kind of hover over here. You'll get a very little kind of line next to the arrow if you see it down there. And I'll just hover over here and just drag slightly. Just drag a little bit, and it'll pull out 2 little handles, and it'll just come down a little bit. And that's all I want. That's perfect. That's fine. Now you can grab these points and drag them and move them around. You could click on here and move these handles up and down, and now you can make them mean. Now he looks mean, but I don't want to do that. I'll undo that by using Command Z on a Mac. And that's the way I want it. I think that looks okay. Hopefully it'll look like a happy dog. And then when I'm done messing with it or manipulating it, I'll go back to my pointer and I'll just make it a solid black. So I'll give it a fill, and I'll get rid of the border because I don't need a border on there. And you could certainly put some kind of highlight in there, but like I said, we're making this as simple as possible. And what I'm going to do with this, I'll even call it eye. I'll double click here, I'll call it eye. You could call it left eye if you want. And now I'm going to make a copy of it. Now you can also hold Option or hold your Alt key and drag it to make a copy, or you could just duplicate. You could do Command D. Edit Duplicate is Command D on a Mac or Control D on Windows. So if you just duplicate, it makes a separate one. Now it's called left eye again. So I'm going to move this over here. and then I'll call that right eye, and it's right eye as I'm looking at it. And then I'll flip it around just like I did with the nostril. I'll use this thing to flip it, and I'll hold shift and click on this and make sure they're aligned up and down. Use this thing here, align middle. That line going through it should make them align up and down, and they're aligned up and down. It doesn't look it right now, but they are. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to group them so they work together. That way it's easier to center it on the page. So I'm going to use this button to group them. And you can see it's called a group, and I'll just call it eyes. I'll double click on the name and call it eyes, even though I named each individual eye. Now this icon means a group, that little thing there. Now if I want to center the group on the page of the two eyes, I just have to click on here. And now that's centered. So now I have my eyes, I have my nose. I'm not sure why this wasn't, I thought this was black. I thought we had a fill. If I didn't fill it, let me go back and fill it and delete the border. Okay, I thought I did that, but anyway, that's my eyes and that's my nose. And the last thing I'll do here before we take a break is I'll try to do his mouth. Now, I'm not worried about the tongue yet. I'll just do his mouth. And there's lots of ways we could do the mouth. We could draw a circle, we could do stuff like that. Now, I'll try doing that. We'll try manipulating a circle. So I'm going to take an ellipse, as they call it. The ellipse, that's that tool right there. And I'm just going to kind of draw and kind of get close to the mouth. It doesn't have to be perfect. Now, I can't see through it, so make sure you get rid of the fill and add a border. And before I mess with anchor points yet, I'm just going to kind of resize this a little bit so that it follows the bend of his mouth a little bit. Not perfectly, but it's about as wide. And I'll stretch it up a little bit. So it kind of follows the mouth. I'll even center it on the page. I'll go up here, click here. So it's centered on the page. Even though the dog isn't perfectly centered, it looks like if you kind of drag it up to the nose, that looks about right. Now, we could make this come in a little bit. We could fix this, but right now I'm going to stick with this circle, and I'll just use this ellipse, and I could even call it mouth if I want. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my squiggle or my convert to path so that I can manipulate the anchor points, and it's still called mouth, but now it's a path. It has a pen there, and I'm going to use my subselect and grab the anchor points, and I'm going to move this down, and we do something like this when we make a heart to a clover or clover to heart or something like that. I think we make a, I forget, something when we work with Gravit in Intro to Computing. I'm going to drag this down, and I'll go here, I'll click on this, I'll check that it's mirrored, because if it's not mirrored, it means these can move separately. So I want them moving together, so I'll use this mirrored, and I'll kind of bring this in a little so it's a little bit tighter. And I'll try to keep it as straight as I can. If you hold shift, it might stay straighter. See, now it's coming in a little better. And I could even move it down a little bit because it looks like his mouth does come down a little bit more. So I'll pull this down. And this is about where this is. Now you might say, well, I don't want his mouth coming up like that. How do I bend this down? Now, if you can do that, it's a problem because it makes the other one come out. So we just have to fix this. This is the one, this anchor point, we can say, make it disconnected. Now what that means is you can drag one handle down and the other will stay where it is. So I'm going to make this anchor point disconnected, this one. And that way I could drag this down kind of like that. Now I might have to pull the other point up a little bit. But let me do the same over here. I'll click on here, I'll make it disconnected, and I'll drag it down. And I'll try to get it the same. Now this is where it's going to be hard to keep it perfectly symmetrical. And I think it's that the dog's mouth isn't perfectly symmetrical, and that's okay. You could even drag a guide, go up to the ruler and kind of drag a guide to make sure that you keep them. Actually, it's pretty good right there, but I could drag a guide here. I drug right from the ruler, and I drag a guide down, and then I could go up a little bit and go up here a little bit. Now, there's ways you could kind of manipulate these to get them perfect, but I'm just going to kind of do it by eye right now. You could even drag a guide down to here and try to get those things as perfect as you can, but that looks pretty good. And maybe I'll drag this in just slightly, and I'll drag this in just slightly, and maybe I'll go down a little bit with that. And I might go just down a little bit here. And that looks pretty good. Now I'll go back to my regular pointer and I'll give it a fill. I'll just hit the plus sign, add a fill, there's this big happy mouth, and I'll take away the border because I don't need it anymore. And it is still called mouth. And what I'll do next is we could even try to make an ear, and we can draw a tongue in there. And what I think I'll do is I'll take a break here so the video doesn't get too long. And if you need to take a break, make sure you save this. Make sure it's saved to your cloud. That's your account up here. That asterisk means it's not saved, so I'm going to hit save. And then what I'm going to do is come back in part 2, and we're going to make the tongue. We'll maybe try to do an ear, and then we'll just throw our type in. So we should be able to do this in 2 videos. So we'll come back to part 2 of ex3 Hoppy Dog logo.